in the beginning, you carry me, and you go before. You are the journey and the journey's end. Amen.
Amen.
Be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is wonderful to be here in New Brunswick. I drove down from the Catskills, so one state over, but it's great to be here. And I want to begin. My name is Bruce Torrey, and I am a speaker and preacher for Food for the Poor. And I want to begin by thanking Father Gideon for allowing me to be here this morning, or Father Gideon is. He's out there somewhere. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be with you this morning. And thank those of you who are supporters of Food for the Poor. Episcopalians traditionally have been very generous supporters of the Food for the Poor mission and ministry. I also give thanks my banjo stayed relatively in tune. Banjos don't like to travel. So. So in February of 2011, I had the opportunity to visit Haiti. It was not with Food for the Poor, it was actually with another mission in a local ministry in Haiti. But I had the opportunity to head over there. This would have been a little bit more than a year after the earthquake, right? So I went with a small group. We were going to build a house, or at least start the process of building a house, and this church that we were with was building a community. And I'd been to Caribbean countries before, Latin American countries before, but nothing prepared me for Haiti. I mean, the first time someone from America sees the kind of poverty that exists in some of these countries, it's a real shock. But Haiti was I was just not ready for it. I mean, we landed in Port-au-Prince, and as we drove through the streets, so many of the buildings were down, the Presidential Palace, the Roman Catholic Cathedral, the Episcopal Cathedral, piles of rubble everywhere in the streets, you know, and people clearly just doing anything they could to get by, to make a little bit of money or to find themselves some food, and then just seas of those NGO tents that everyone saw on television, those 10 by 10 tents that were intended for people to live in for 6 months and that some people are still living in now in 2014. So it was a real shock, as visiting poor countries have always been to me. And I've always had kind of like this roller coaster experience when I visited these countries and worked in them, because when I've experienced the poverty, having not grown up in poverty, you know, and certainly not that kind of poverty, it really brings you down, you know? And then of course you meet the people, and the people are fantastic. The people are great. And you get to get to know them, you get to know their families, you work alongside them, building a house or something like that, and you have this great uplifting relationship with someone from another culture that you wouldn't have had otherwise, you know? And then you see something else that's really sad, people suffering, and you go down, and it goes kind of up and down all the way through. It's kind of like riding a roller coaster. Yeah. Well, but then there's always moments that are particularly special, and the moment that was particularly special for me is we were taken on one afternoon to see an orphanage that was run by this ministry. And it was an orphanage for little girls, about 7 to 13, and maybe 15. And then as these things happened, this orphanage had not been touched by the earthquake. It was completely pristine. And it was actually this beautiful building. It was a very green area, and it was kind of like marble floors. It was a two-story building. It had kind of a U-shape to it. with an open end on the parking lot. And we went there so that we could visit the orphans and see the ministry that was being done there. So they brought us into this beautiful courtyard in the middle of this building, and we waited for the girls to come. And finally they came in through this opening from the parking lot. And they were all dressed up, for us, they were gorgeous. And they came in and they immediately started doing what my kids would never do. They started cleaning. They took brooms and they were sweeping up the courtyard and things like that. And then after they did that, they played some games, and our group, we had about 10 or 12 of our group who and some of us joined in with them. They had a jump rope and that kind of thing. And then we were supposed to have this moment where we did something for them. So we decided we were going to sing Amazing Grace together. So I pull out my little travel banjo, and I play Amazing Grace. We sang the whole hymn for them. And as soon as we finished the hymn, without skipping a beat, these little girls sang the entire thing back to us in Creole. And it was like one of those kind of moments where you just have this immediate affinity, this commonality of faith. We were from completely different worlds, and we were just together, and we were one group at that moment, and that really kind of melted my heart, to see these little girls who honestly, were the lucky kids. It sounds so crazy to me, anyway, to say these orphans are the lucky kids, but here were these girls who, if they hadn't found their way to this orphanage by whatever way it was, by maybe their parents having been killed or by being abandoned, whatever it was, if they hadn't found their way to this orphanage, they might not have even survived, on the streets. They might not have even survived. And here they were in this beautiful building with regular meals and an education, which is just such an incredible premium, because there's no public education in Haiti. If you can't pay for school, you don't go to school, right? So it was really really uplifting to see this and to kind of realize again that these were the lucky ones. And every time I've been involved in something like that, where I see a ministry of the community of faith that reaches out and raises people up who are really in dire need, it just reminds me of the core of the gospel. The core of Jesus' ministry. Because Jesus' ministry, first and foremost, was reaching out to those who were marginalized, those who were dispossessed, those who had nothing. Whether it was because of poverty, or it was because they were just on the edge of society. For women, for instance, in first century Palestine, you were on the edge of society by virtue of being a woman. Period. End of statement. And in a lot of third world countries, that's true as well. Just by being a woman, you're kind of marginalized. And this is where Jesus' ministry focused. This is what it was about. You don't have to read more than a couple of pages into the Gospels to see that this was where Jesus' heart was. And Jesus came to save us all, and he was interested in every human being, including well-off people like Nicodemus, But his heart was with people who had been discarded by the world, to show them that God's love was for all humanity, and especially those who were in need. And we see this, it's almost hard to go a Sunday without seeing this even in the gospel. Today we see it all over the place. We see the story from Ezekiel with people who are dispossessed, right, from their country, from their homeland. And they're wondering if God can even be in the place they're in. And Ezekiel has this vision of God regathering the community, giving them hope, giving them a new life, a resurrection, if you will, a new life in the future. Okay? The gospel, of course, speaks for itself. The gospel is a resurrection story. And the gospel is the story of Jesus reaching into the life of someone he knew and giving them new life. And of course, that's what the gospel is about, that new life. And it might be new life for eternity and what God prepares us for eternity, but the gospel doesn't start there. The gospel starts with new life for people in this world, to give them hope, to give them a future, to give them the opportunity to live. Now, the crazy thing about all this is that my experience with these orphans in Haiti, is that these girls, not only, as I said, were the lucky ones, even what they came out of might have been better off than what I have even experienced. Here they were, healthy, taken care of, and supported, right? And at the ministry I was staying at, there was a tent city in that ministry. And so inside the wall, this walled church, right? This walled church were all these NGO tents. And I mean, when you walked through the streets, when you walked through the mud, right? That was between these tents, and realized that when it rained, that water went right through those tents. I walked into a couple of tents and met a couple of people, and these are people who would, they'd have to stand in a corner when it rained, because the mud would just slush through, right? And yet, even they were somewhat fortunate, because they were in a compound with a wall around it. They weren't out in the streets where women in these tents were often raped and brutalized, because people could walk in any hour of the day and night. And this ministry had put lights, kind of like solar street lights up, so there was light at night, and they had created kind of their own police force from some of the men. So there was even, and these were people who came for meals provided by this ministry every day, right? So they had most of them had no work. They were surviving on the food that was given them. And yet, even they were in better situations than, for instance, a community called Shada in North Haiti, which is probably the worst slum in the Cape Haitian area, where you'll actually see children with orange hair, because they are starving. Where children will starve, children will die, because they have no means whatsoever, right? It's these children, it's these people that Food for the Poor ministers to. Food for the Poor is the largest international relief and development agency in the United States, and it works in 17 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. And Food for the Poor's ministry is to the most destitute poor in these countries. People who literally sometimes can starve. People who have no homes. People who have no access to food, right? People who have no hope. And it's through the generous people who support Food for the Poor that hope is given to these folks. That they have an opportunity to have some kind of life of dignity and a future with possibility of maybe work and possibility of possibly school. And Food for the Poor reaches in to the lives of these people, providing schools, providing medicine, providing food, housing. All these things are part of this ministry that all of us who give to Food for the Poor make happen. Giving hope through what we have in our part of the world, which is some resource to do that. And in fact, I've forgotten my, can someone give me one of the brochures that's in, because I forgot to bring mine down. Thank you. If you take out the brochure, and actually, you open, actually on the cover of this brochure is a young girl named Wachina who lives in a town called Manville, which is just outside of Port-au-Prince. And she was one who was not in one of the NGO tents, but basically lived in a shack, because so many of these people have, a couple of pieces of board or even cardboard or a couple pieces of corrugated metal. And that's what they live in, houses that can be knocked down without any issue at all, no security, no future, right? And Wachina was in that situation with her mother and her sister. But if you look at this brochure, you can take it home with you and learn a little bit about Food for the Poor. Food for the Poor is an incredibly efficient operation. 95% of all gifts go directly to ministry to the poor. We have less than 5% overhead in the work that we do. And as you can see from if you look at the side with the thick yellow line on it, you will see to the left of that line just how far first world dollars go in the third world. And that's why we can have so much impact on people in the third world from our vantage point in the first world. For $3,200, you can build someone a home. $3,200. It's only 450 square feet, but it's got a lock on the door, a solid roof, solid walls, a couple of bedrooms, right? And the opportunity to build a home is something that we can have. Maybe someone in this parish could build someone a home. Maybe the parish itself could raise the money to build someone a home. Or water projects. For $205, you could put a water pump in a village water well. And as I'm sure most of you know, access to clean water is one of the biggest issues in terms of health and certainly in infant mortality in the third world, right? And for $43.80, you can feed a hungry child for a year. It costs food for the poor 6 cents to give a rice and beans meal to a hungry child. Twice a day, 365 days a year, $43.80. These are the kind of opportunities that we have. These are the kind of ways we can, just like what happens in Scripture today, with the bones coming together in Ezekiel, or Jesus raising Lazarus, right? We can change a life and take it from a life of despair and make it a life of hope. Give someone a life of hope. So I hope you will take the opportunity to support Food for the Poor today. There's an envelope, if you pull at that yellow tab, there's an envelope here that's attached to this. And I hope you'll consider a generous gift to Food for the Poor today. If you do, please make sure you give us your name and address. So we can thank you, get you tax credit for it. Might as well take advantage of what the government does for you. You can put it in here, and at the end of the liturgy, I'll be wherever we wait at the end of the liturgy, folks. You can give me an envelope, and I will make sure it gets back to our office. But more than that, I hope you will consider becoming a regular supporter of Food for the Poor. This is what we can do to solve problems in the third world, right? This is what we can do. This is the way we can respond to the needs of these people who are in so much desperation. My wife and I, every year when we make out our budget, to the extent that we make out a budget, we're not the greatest budgeters on the planet, but what we do is the first thing we do is we make out a pledge to our parish so the work of the gospel goes on and the work of the church can work in the world. And the next thing we do is we pick out charities, both secular and religious, that we think are doing the work of Christ in the world, and we support them on a regular basis. Because Jesus, as Jesus knew and told us, the poor you will always have with you. And our ministry is about reaching out to the poor. And I can't think of a better way and a more efficient way than through what Food for the Poor does for the poorest of the poor in the Caribbean and Latin America. And every time we do this, every time we reach out in the name of Christ, and I don't care whether we're reaching out physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or financially, every time we reach out in the world in the name of Christ, we become Christ for someone else. We become the grace of God in someone else's life. And so I will end where I began, with grace.